Hey community, we have Julian from Butan who's joining us today. Julian is the founder and creative director of one of the fastest growing brands in South Africa. So Julian, it's great to have you, and our community is super excited to be learning about your journey. But before we start speaking a bit about the brand, I think it will be great for us to get to know you. So let's look at prior to 2001. Growing up, and you told me an exciting story of Germany. So we're excited to get to know a bit about you, and then we'll head over to the brand.
100%. Shavia, thanks for having me on the platform. I was very excited to be here. Very excited to share my story. And this is not usually where the story starts. Most people want to hear everything after 2001, but I'm happy to share. So I was born in Jersey in 1981. And my parents, they came to South Africa from Germany in the 70s. So it came like 86, it was a state of emergency in South Africa. Things were politically very bad, and also my parents were involved in a couple of things that the state didn't look at favorably. So we had the privilege that we could leave the country, which was obviously very sad because I had a great childhood here, fond memories. We left in 86 and we moved to Hamburg, Germany, where I started my schooling. I went to high school, and in 97, so my parents had split up in the meantime, but my mom met someone new who also happened to have lived in South Africa most of his life. Similar story, and we decided, with the political changes, it was maybe time to return. So we came back to South Africa in 97, but moved to Cape Town. And that's where I continued my schooling. I went to the German school. Then I went to UCT to study engineering. So I did my mechanical engineering course, which I graduated in 2005. And I just really felt, I always say engineering was my passion, but it wasn't my calling. And I felt that there was, something creative that was really lacking. And that creativity I saw with something that had come about in 2001 when I was still at school. And that was, I've always been, I don't know, always, but I got into hip hop in the mid 90s, like around 94, and I was like heavily involved in the culture. And, coming to South Africa, there wasn't much from an aesthetics, from a fashion perspective available, And you know how it is with hip hop and a lot of other music subcultures. The look is very important. That's key. If you want to reflect your lifestyle, you need to look the part, And not finding anything, made me think, well, I've got my creative talent. Why not do something myself? Why not print T-shirts myself? It's like, what's stopping me? And that's where that creative journey of Butan really started. I don't know if you recall, but there's a little program called Microsoft Paint. Very simple pixel-based program, and I created a logo with that. I bought an iron-on kit, proper like where you like take a page, you print it out, you put it on a T-shirt, you iron it on, and that's how the whole idea was born. In fact, you know what? I've actually got it here. I didn't hang it up yet in my new office, but this is the first ever Butan T-shirt. So,
Wow.
yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah,
And
no, you've come a long way.
I definitely come a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where it started. Like then I printed. Well, I actually put a couple of designs together, asked some schoolmates to give me feedback. The favorite design I printed on 20 T-shirts. Well, I'm going to fast track the story, but it was quite
Yeah.
involved. I had to do my research. Back in the days, there was no Google. It was the yellow pages. I found printers. I found T-shirt suppliers. The cost of everything, including labels, at the time came to just over 2,000 Rand, which was a lot more money than it is today.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
and I went to my dad and I said, this is my proposal, and he lent me the money. And I went
Yeah.
and printed the T-shirts, sold them at school, made the money back, bought more, paid my dad back, and that's how it started. But then there's that big gap of studying engineering, and then post engineering, I did graduate, but I was just like, no, I need to do my own thing.
Yeah.
I need to revive this school project of mine, and that's how I got into
Right.
it. Mm.
Yeah. So between 2001 and 2006, that's when you were studying engineering, right? Because
Correct. So
2006 is, yeah.
that's correct. Yeah.
Ye-
And look,
And
I must say, this is always the question. People are like, "Did you waste your time?" It's like, absolutely not. I think it's
yeah.
a great privilege to be able to study. It's equipped me with so many skills,
Mhm.
certain way of thinking that's really allowed me to build this company.
Yeah, yeah, cool, man. And earlier on, we're kind of getting into the chat about the name, and I think you mentioned that it came from, or it origin from Ubuntu. So, if you could probably just tell us a bit about how the name, came about.
Okay, so yes, so in Zulu, Abantu people, um, and during apartheid, that term got abused. There were terms like Bantu education, Bantustan, and this is almost like it's a remixing or a rearrangement of the letters to something entirely new. That to taking Bhutan, I mean Bantu, and turning it into Bhutan, um, which we feel is a form of reclaiming history. It is, taking something from the past, um, something that obviously got a negative connotation, but remixing
Yeah.
it, reclaiming it, and creating something new for a new positive
Mm.
outlook in the new South Africa. So that's really just also the ethos of the brand. So as a brand, we tap into cultural heritage,
Yeah.
a lot of lost cultural heritage, because the youth of today, unfortunately, is not really, a lot of these things have gotten lost and they're not really being taught and not even taught in the home.
Yeah.
And it's such a pity because, culturally, Africa is, I mean, one of the richest continents, and I mean, just
Mhm.
look at our country. The cultural
Yeah.
heritage is incredible, and it's important to understand the cultural heritage because it also aids us to understand our identity,
Yeah.
holistically as people. Um, and that's what we do. We tap into that cultural heritage, we remix it and put it into a contemporary context and something that the youth understands. And we chose the medium of streetwear.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. So tell me, the year 1981 holds a significant connection to your brand. Perhaps you can just tell me a bit about that
Yeah,
connection.
that was as I said earlier. I was born in
Yeah.
1981, so it's
Okay.
actually just that simple. So it's just
All
taking
right.
that as the starting
Yeah.
point of the journey.
Yeah. No, cool, man. So tell me, like, I mean, you're not just the founder, you are the creative director, right? And based on some of the research that I've done, you do work with other designers and creatives within, your team, which is great. But how do you ensure that your garments reflect the ideas, aspirations, and the heritage of the Afrocentric signature that your brand has established?
So how do I ensure
How do you ensure
that I
that yeah, so, your clothing, your garments reflect the ideas or the aspirations of the heritage, which is that Afrocentric signature that you've built. So, it has a definition in terms of the style that you've created over the years. And how do you ensure
Mhm.
that it remains the same? And I actually read something, just to follow up on that, when Black Panther came about, and then you had, you've been running this Panther, which is from the Black Panther in the US, if I am correct, right? So you already
Yeah,
was on that style and type of theme before the movie or Marvel actually, started that. So maybe, yeah, just the authenticity of your Afro style, your signature of your brand, because I mean it is distinctive, right? I mean, when you go onto your social platforms, onto your website, or even if someone is using your garment, you know that this is a Bhutan. It's a signature type of look. So yeah, so just to
100%.
understand the creativity behind it.
Look, I think a lot, starts with obviously a point of inspiration, right? I think for me, and this is a very unusual thing, I mean, look at me. I'm just this white boy,
Yeah,
born from German parents. And who's this guy? Kind of, I mean, this is what I would always feel, some people might, or this might resonate with them, where it's like, who is this white guy telling us about our culture and our heritage? And I think it's an important thing that I want to talk about because I do believe that, and this is very controversial, but I do believe
Mm.
that being born in this country, living within this cultural realm, celebrating this cultural realm, I consider myself to be an African, right?
Yeah.
I'm not black. I'm not pretending to be black. I could never because that's a whole nother
Mm.
thing. But I think it's very important that all of us living in this country and on this continent start adopting this idea of what is it to be an African, understanding that we are an African. Because if we don't do that, we'll forever be foreign. We forever will chase our colonial roots. Our forefathers. They came here. I'm quarter Scottish, quarter that. It's like, no, the
Yeah.
fact is we African, and that means we also need to embrace that, and we need to embrace the culture and holistically, because being African is not just one thing, and we know that in South Africa, in particular in South Africa, being South African is not just one particular thing, right? But being an African and growing up
Yeah.
with this beautiful culture and the versatility of the various cultures around me really served as a point of inspiration. And I'm saying, why is this beauty not really celebrated? What we see is there's a lot of appropriation going on. You will
Mm.
find that there's a European or Western interpretation of what African is, but it's through a Western lens. And I think it's important that we as Africans recognize the beauty, are inspired by it, and then bring it to the world through our lens, right?
Mm.
My lens, I guess, is, my passion for streetwear, also for street art, etc. So when I see this beauty as my starting point, as inspiration, I say, oh wow, how can I fuse this with my understanding of it and create something beautiful, but that is authentic, that authentically brings the richness, you know, um, of this heritage across. Because I think this is also the key. It's like people always talk about cultural appropriation, and I just want to also make clear what we do is certainly not cultural appropriation because it's cultural celebration.
Right.
Everything that we do and every inspiration that we sample from is always highlighted through our stories. If we are, basing something on the Basotho blanket, we will do a research about the Basotho blanket, the entire story of it, and highlight that in our storytelling. And that is the second part that I want to touch on, really, to bring that authenticity across. It's starting with the inspiration, then the interpretation, and feeding that with the research. I think that's always key. And this is something that I think is an amazing journey for me because I never understood the levels and the depth of a lot of the cultural heritage that surrounds us. And then having done the research, and it's fascinating. I mean, you'll be surprised about the amazing stories that will surface on just little things. I mean, even the Basotho blanket itself has a fantastic history behind it, and yeah, that's I think the the creative journey that then allows us to put a product out that is authentic. It is made by Africans and it is created through an African lens.
Yeah. No, that's great, and I think it's so important. There's something that you mentioned there, which is cultural celebration, and I think through your brand, you're celebrating the cultures of South African. I think it's so important also to view it through your lens. Like you mentioned, even though you're white, but you're able to look at the culture differently to an Indian, to a black, or even to a colored. So I think that's so important that we all can look at something but then get different aspirations from it. And that helps us create and sustain our brands that we build. And I think it's so important, in terms of what you mentioned. I think, that word, cultural celebration, it's something that we all should, try and envision. And like you mentioned, like the perception of how Europeans look at our brands or as a country could be different in the way we perceive it. And I think it's so important to have brands that are showcasing, what we do in our own unique way. And and I think that's what you guys do. You don't try and copy what someone else is doing. And I mean, you guys have been operating for what, like 17 years. So I mean, yeah. So just to a lead up to that, Julian. So perseverance, right? The definition of perseverance is persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. So let's look at your operations from 2006 all the way up to 2023, right? So it's 17 years. Yeah, I hope my math is right. 17 years. So during that time, I'm sure perseverance uh, had to come into play, right? You've been operating for 17 years, and I could say that is because I know in 2008, 2009 we were in a recession, and then COVID, which is not too long ago, and we're currently in that phase, right? So in that 17 years, what did perseverance mean to you?
Well, look, I mean, you said it. Without perseverance, we wouldn't have continued on this journey. We wouldn't still be here because undoubtedly it's been a roller coaster ride of note. You mentioned the big economic external factors, but there've been obviously many more factors, many more obstacles, and I think obviously the perseverance also comes from the fact that there's a dream, right? There's a dream that leads me to believe in something. And this is not blind belief and blind faith. I need to mention that we are also realistic. I'm not just going to go and say I absolutely believe in this thing, and regardless of it failing, I'm going to keep going. And that's not the case. I think it's what the perseverance does, and the belief and the dream is that you don't just quit with every small obstacle that comes your way. And if you can keep your eye on the prize, on the bigger picture, and you still see that there's something special that you're doing and you're going to attain that if you just carry on, that's what fuels that persevering spirit. Because undoubtedly it is something that also I don't think perseverance is something that can be necessarily taught. The tools can be taught, but it is a mental state that I think every individual needs to go through themselves, and we all do. Because perseverance is something that is not just in business; it is in everyday life. Life is tough. People, we experience difficulties, mental difficulties, loss, etc. And there's something that I think it's almost like it's part of our nature, this persevering spirit. Like the human species is an incredible species in that sense. We have a great survival spirit, but it is tapping into that as well, And I think,
Yeah.
again, dream, the right philosophy. I think that's also what drives you. I think, and these are the stories also that we need to tell, and also that we need to bring across in this. I think a lot of the youth today are being sold this idea of, you do very little and you achieve a lot, and you achieve a lot very quickly. But as that may be true for some people, there's a lot of lucky people out there where they attain success like this without putting much effort in. But for the majority of people, there's a journey that is involved in getting there, and that we need to realize that journey in itself is also important. So it's like we don't persevere to suffer. We also persevere to carry on, and then within that, take the learnings and grow. As they say, the journey is the destination. And I think it's very important to always have that in the back of your head when times are tough and you're about to quit. It's like my also like the practical tools. When I can't tell you, it's countless times I've wanted to throw in the towel. I mean, it's ridiculous how many times I wanted to throw in the towel. What I do then, I just generally just sleep over it. I'll get in the evening, it's just like, okay, I'm done. I sleep over it, I wake up, and there's a new day, there's a new outlook, a new perspective, a new opportunity, a new light that will, pull you towards the future. And those are the tools that we can use.
Yeah.
But everyone needs to experience it for themselves and just push on.
And just to touch on what you just mentioned, right? So I think we chatted the last time where we work with a lot of creators, and something that you mentioned is that even with you being operating for 17 years, right? There were times where you wanted to throw in the towel and say, hey, like this is not working, and this could be a result of maybe sales or revenue or a channel that closed down. There's multiple reasons that could have happened. So tell me, like, what happens in a case where, because we all go through it, even us as running our business, is like, hey, is this working? And I think the perseverance come is, hey, like, you need to be realistic whether this is going to work, and do I persevere, or no, maybe I should throw in the towel in this situation, but I'm going to
Yeah.
persevere in the long term goal. And I think you mentioned long term goal. So I think a lot of, and the creators that we speak to, is that it's that instant gratification, and I think that's what social media actually did, was it shows people the now, is that, hey, look at me, I'm living this life, or I'm achieving X. And even with you as your brand, like, people don't look at the throwing the towel moments. They look at an established brand that's generating revenues, that's built a community. But what's your thoughts around creators where things are not going according to plan, and where we in that point where, like, I throw the towel, and do I go pick it up and just persevere and say, like, there's more for me? So I think the question relates back to setbacks, and I think it's such a fine line between setbacks versus throwing in the towel, where I want to give up on this because it's purely not working. So what's your advice around that?
100%. So,
Yeah.
look, the reality is that we need something to keep us going, right, from month to month.
Yeah.
If your business is loss making, and loss making to the point that you are not making ends meet, and you're not able to pay your staff, you're not able to pay yourself, etc., you need to seriously ask yourself, what are the problems? And in that case, you need to seriously pivot. Whether pivoting means stopping that project altogether and doing something new, then that's that. Whether it means you're bringing another project on board, or, I mean, it could take on many different forms, or it's just making drastic changes within your business model. Um, for instance, let me talk about us. For instance, the
Yeah.
reason we haven't thrown in the towel with Butan is because Butan is that's like our love child. It is this child that we've been rearing for this really long time, and we're putting all our effort into it because we truly believe that this child is going to be something very special, very meaningful one day, and not just to ourselves. I think
Mhm.
also to our community, to a lot of other people. There's, it's a very, it's it serves us also with a purpose. Because purpose is also very important. I think,
Yeah.
especially with perseverance, and I think money alone shouldn't be a purpose. There needs to be something bigger, and you need to ask yourself: is it a purpose just for yourself, or could it be a purpose for a larger scale of people, a community,
Yeah.
even a country, or globally? And for us, Bhutan is that. Bhutan is that um, child that we're rearing, that we truly believe has something very special. It hasn't given us the financial reward as yet, right?
Mm.
So what we've done is we brought other projects on board that enable us to get from month to month, that enable us to bring in enough revenue so we can survive, and sometimes even throw additional money into Bhutan. Because Bhutan really has required a lot of investment over the years to
Right.
keep it going and to maneuver it through the difficult times. And that's what we've done. We said, okay, well, we've got these expertise. It's not like we haven't learned anything over the years. We've got an amazing supply chain. We've got relationships with factories. We have the knowledge of. I mean, we import. We 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 have a great infrastructure going. We have a network. We have all these things. So we said, well, how can we utilize that to make revenue otherwise? And I mean, with us, we've been doing that for years already. It actually started at varsity, how also the whole thing became viable in my head, that I produced clothing for the various faculties at UCT. UCT Radio, we did, that was actually our first job. And that's how I learned the garment industry. I failed to mention that. So that I did while studying, to also, just get yeah, get money in for myself, and we continue that, and that's grown into a full-fledged apparel agency now. So that is where we do, I mean, we've done stuff for Savannah, we've done some stuff now with Castle Nookstad, we've done doing a project with Warner Music. I mean, it's a really nice client, like a really nice client base, and it's white label solutions where we design and produce for customers. Sometimes we just come in from a consultant point of view, but that's what we did to keep the lights on. So sometimes if there's that bigger project that you really don't want to let go of, that you believe really just requires a little bit more time and effort and perseverance, you have to obviously bring something in on the other hand as well to make it survive, right? I'm not saying this is the right approach for everybody. There's different approaches. Some people will literally go in, and if a project hasn't been profitable after a certain amount of time, they just cut it. They're ruthless, right? I mean, that's a lot of, there's different schools of thought around entrepreneurship. They literally go, they test 20 things. If 7 of them don't work, they cut it, ruthless, and we carry on with the ones that work. My journey just happens to be different, right? But now the advice for young entrepreneurs is don't just give up, because you've already put so much work and effort into something, and you must have built something. There must be a network, there must be an infrastructure, there must be a knowledge base. See how you can capitalize on that. And the first thing is, how do we pivot? How do we change things? We pivot all the time. We had to pivot now, I mean, in recent months, massively, because everything has changed. The retail landscape has changed. Load shedding has thrown a huge spanner in the works for local production. But on the other hand, the weak rand has thrown an even bigger spanner in the works for our imports. So it's like we had to pivot on that side, so on the production side, and then also on the retail side, to see how do we maneuver now with retail being generally flat. Well, that's like brick and mortar retail, but how do we still make money? We're looking at even our online store approaching a more of an international market, because with the rand being weak, with the euros and dollars, our goods become more affordable to them. So constantly changing and never being comfortable. I think that's also key.
Yeah, yeah, no, and yeah, no, it's great points there, and you mentioned like pivot and persevere, and those words like hold it close to me, because I'm actually reading a book, The Lean Startup, and it speaks specifically
I've
on
read it, yeah. I've read
exactly,
it.
and perhaps maybe one of the reasons how you, I mean that's how you differentiate where there's times you need to pivot and there's times you need to persevere, and I think it's so important to understand the business that you're in, but because a lot of times as founders and directors of businesses, you get caught up in the fact that, hey, this is my baby, it's what I think the market needs, and you stay true to it. But then you need to understand what are customers looking for, and how do you pivot or persevere, whether it's in your production, whether it's in your go-to-market strategy, whether it's through channel partners or your partnerships. So I mean, there's so many ways businesses can be learning and pivoting or persevering, in what works best for you. But I think, that's a good lead up to the next question, right? And I think, you also mentioned that, as a brand, you are still building, right? You are still looking for growth. So I know you and I had the last time when we met, we had this conversation about community, right? And I think we spoke about, or we did speak about our accelerator and how we're working with creators, right? And part of our 6 pillars is community building, and it's something that we learned, and it's through studying and understanding markets and understanding how the creator's life cycle, right, or the creator's journey is that. 1 million followers means nothing. You should rather be building a community. So whether you have a community of 5,000 people where you're engaging with them, that community essentially becomes your source of revenue. So it's not necessarily, and I think that's the misconception that the market has, is that you need to have 1 million followers, or you need to be building followers, then that would lead to you generating income. So whether you're a brand or a creator or whatever you're selling, right? And we believe that's not the case. You have to be building your product for your audience. Yes, that's true, because within your following and your audience, you start converting them into your tribe or your community. So what has community been to your brand and to you? over the years?
Yeah, I think as you said, community is everything. It's not it's not the quantity of your followers, it's the quality. And to
Yeah.
not be misunderstood, what I mean by quality, it doesn't say anything about the individuals, but it says something about their relationship to your brand. We, could be dressing a celebrity, certain celebrity, which we have over the years,
Yeah.
and it's given us massive peaks in sales. But you realize that the audience that starts following you because of that celebrity is going to jump onto the next trend when another celebrity wears another brand. They not haven't necessarily engaged with your brand beyond that encounter, right? Where the quality comes in is, and it's a much slower process, is where you bring people closer into your story. The way I always say is it's like an onion. It's like the outer
Yeah.
layer is really just the surface value that you're putting out there. Surface value is some celebrity is wearing this brand. It's being now perceived as something cool and trendy, and but then if that's all you're offering, I feel you're never going to build a community. So what you need is to take those layers off and see what's beneath that. And not every customer will come on that journey with you, but the customers that will, those are the ones that will become part of your community, because as you take the layers off, you talk more about the core values of the brand, the brand journey. And that's when people truly start engaging, and when they truly start following. And beyond that, there's a loyalty that's really being built. And I feel that's what's unfortunately lacking with this influencer culture, is that influencers, a lot of them, and I'm not saying all of them, I'm sure there's a lot of amazing influencers out there that also bring substance and values, but the majority are really just people with a large following. Then brands come, throw their brands at them, and regardless of alignment. I mean, of course, there's influencer agencies that will now go deeper and say, is there good brand alignment? Does it make sense for that particular influencer to push that brand? But usually, it's surface level. It's you're going to get 20,000 likes on a post, but those 20,000 people are not going to engage with your brand
Yeah.
necessarily. You might get a few sales out of it, but they will have forgotten about that afterwards, because your product now is on another influencer, or that particular influencer is now pushing another brand. So it becomes very short-lived. And I think that's where we're not building community. So for me, having over the years brought more and more people into into those lower levels of the onion, and building a community is something that sustained us, and that's why I feel, and we're still around. We've got a very loyal following, and I think that's also important in building not just the brand, but building a love mark. I'm sure you're familiar with the term. You look at
Yeah.
brands like Apple, and many others that literally, I mean, they don't just wear it or they use it because it's trendy, but because they've got an
Yeah.
intimate relationship with those brands. And
Yeah.
that's the power of community.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's amazing. Thanks for that. And like an important part there, just to track back, is the fact that the relationship between let's call them content creators, influencers. I think yeah, the term has changed now. So it's content creators and the relationship with brands. And we've chatted to tons of brands, in South Africa regarding the return on investment. That hey, we need this is a cost for us, but then the return on it, how do we measure that? Because right now, yes, we probably get likes and follows, but we need to convert that into sales. And so what she mentioned is, you have creators out there where they partner up with a brand, right? Or even for themselves, like they have a following. They're following me for my fashion or my sense of fashion, right, and the way I dress. But then now you're trying to sell a digital marketing course. So similar to that, if you're trying to partner with a brand, but then your audience follows you for a different reason, and then now you're trying to convert that audience into purchasing a product that you're not related to, or you haven't been pushing content about. So I think that's where the misconnection comes. Is that hey, you might have 100,000 followers, but your followers are following you for a different reason than what you're trying to promote on your social pages or the brand partnership you're trying to engage in. And I think that's what we're trying to do with the accelerator. And it's actually the discussion you and I had earlier on, is how do we, how do we bridge that gap between brands and creators? Because, I mean, you know this, you've been in the game for much longer than I have. You know that there's tons of creators out there that have this type they've developed this type of creativity that will add so much value to brands because they look at it and they're able to resonate with the audience differently, but then they don't have the business element of it. And how do you merge that two together? How do you bring the authenticity and the creativity to a brand and then merge that together where in return they will be able to build passive income or a sustainable income while the brand earns revenue through sales? And I think that's what we're trying to do, and that's exactly what we're trying to push. In the next couple of months, is bridging that gap between brands and creators and building that community. So yeah, it's amazing to hear from a brand's perspective.
But then let me add to that, because I think what I would see, as I said, a lot of these relationships seem so short-lived. It's like, yes, today I'm promoting this product, today, tomorrow I'm promoting another product. I think what would be more meaningful is to really build campaigns. To say, okay, this is a content creator, and there is alignment. How do you build a journey and support, not just for just one quick in and out campaign, and then, there's, as I said, the next product is sort of already lined up, but how can we really create value for the content creator? Because that's also important. I think it's important that brands also sometimes show some commitment, and it's not just because today you're hot, we will work with you. Tomorrow you're not. Someone else will work with you, and we will work with someone else. I think it becomes problematic because people become so confused. There's so much messaging out there. You're being bombarded with products and content and this, that, and the other, and there's no time to truly engage and to truly find meaning in any of that. So I think it's just about really brands also saying, we're going to commit to a journey. And we've done that. I think there's many journeys that we've had over the past 17 years where, even through ups and downs of some of the, call them content creators, influencers, people of interest, celebrities, whatever you may call it, right? Where we truly said we're embarking on a relationship. And what's also nice is with a lot of them, we've embarked on a relationship when their career was really just starting to come up, and we go with them through their peak and maybe through a slight slump, but you stay on that journey. And I think that is authenticity, and that in the long run will also lead to sales. But this quick in and out, it's inauthentic, and I think people will start seeing through it. There's no true, we look at an influencer content creator and they're promoting a product. Maybe some people still see, okay, that person really actually enjoys that product. There'll come a time we start seeing through it and we're like, no, that person got paid to promote that product. There's no true value there. So I think that could be an approach,
Yeah. And it's exactly what you just said, right? Is that people are going to be seeing through it. And I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar, there was a trend when it comes to de-influencing. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but essentially content creators or influencers where, reviewing products, but they're giving bad reviews, right? So basically they're telling the audiences what products not to buy, right? Versus what products to buy. So, when I read an article from Forbes, and basically when they did their research to understand, this trend on de-influencing, and what they discovered was, creators are trying to build that trust and credibility back with their audience, or trying to reestablish that relationship of trust and credibility. And that's the reason why they're going this route. And I think goes back to what you said earlier on, is that I think there's tons of opportunity for long-term partnerships. And I think that's so important, is that, you as a brand, I think that, and I truly believe that there's so much of creativity and creators out there in South Africa where they can help your brand give you perhaps that extra revenue that you're looking for. because of the community that they've built and have access to, the authenticity and the way they're able to showcase your brand in a different light, targeting a different audience, could be, a different segment of audience that you probably haven't reached yet as a brand, right? Just as an example. But I think, that's the type of relationships I think we need to start establishing between brands and creators. That long term where, hey, like if you are making X amount of revenue, there's no way you're not going to be paying this creator X amount of revenue, right? And that's where sustainable income comes for both parties. And I think that's ideally what brands are looking for. And as well as content creators, like, just to touch on, we did a couple of stats where we met with creators, and most of them, right, a huge percentage of them are still working 9 to 5. And a lot of them are looking for sustainable income. How do I work with brands where I can receive monthly revenues from them, right? But not for me to just go and post 3 times a week. Is that the only way we see that working is where a brand pays them a percentage, right? A percentage of sales. So what's your thoughts around that, where it's revenue sharing, where for every sale they bring in, so if they have access to 5,000 clients, right, through an email list, and then they're able to convert X amount into purchasing your product, are you okay as a brand paying them a percentage of that sale?
Look, I think if it can be tracked, right? If you're working, say, with a coupon code. So if, content creator X receives a coupon code, they share it with their network, and you can track the sales. Absolutely. I think for me personally, I feel that that's the most effective way of motivating people. We do it within our sales team. It's target based. It's like achieve X, and you're receiving a certain percentage of revenue. It also gives you the idea that you're part of something. Part of something that you're building. Because I think the worst is that you feel like you're constantly building someone else's dream and making someone else rich, and you just kind of get paid pittance. But if you see that by whatever you're putting in, and whatever you're putting in beyond what is maybe expected is actually giving you a turn, it motivates you. It creates loyalty. So I think it's imperative actually that companies and brands operate that way. But again, as I said, it needs to be trackable. What a content creator might come and say, I've got 1 million followers. You should give me 10% of your sales because I'm going to boost sales for you. Me as a company, I'd say, but I need to see that. I need to see, and the engagement alone on your socials isn't enough tracking for me. People might say all sorts of amazing things about them and their and your product, and you might see a revenue spike. But that revenue spike could also come from 10 other marketing activities that you have going.
Exactly.
So as long as it's trackable, I think it's imperative that there's something attached to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if like, in terms of creators, what they've been complaining about, which is the algorithms, they're not getting the engagement. So, there's so many creators speaking about, when I had like 5,000 followers, I had better engagement than now that I have 30,000 followers. And that's basically the algorithms, right? Instagram, TikTok, they all want content. And then there's so much of creators aspiring. There's so much of content on these platforms that yours gets funneled within those platforms. And that's why, like, even with Livespace, like with the creators we work with, like a lot of them, we also ask them to push big into YouTube, because YouTube, even though it's long form content, it takes more time and effort, but then you have more of an engaged audience. So if you want to convert that audience into purchasing a product from a brand or through affiliate links, you have access to a community there. So while you're pushing on Instagram and TikTok, like, also build your community on YouTube, because that's where you get a lot of engagement, and that's where I think your community actually sits in terms of developing a long-term relationship. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. We've also witnessed that. It's like, the more followers you have, the less engagement you get. And I feel also the more you start boosting and throwing money at it, it also starts limiting you, because obviously these platforms want to make money, So they see you spending. What do they do to entice you to spend more? If now suddenly your engagement goes up, you'd spend less. So they stifle that. I mean, this is my assumption. I mean, this could be seen as a huge accusation, but my assumption is, and just having seen the trends over the years, that that's really what's happening. So ultimately, these platforms want to make money, and they're gonna drive you to spend more money. Of course, it's different. We are a commercial platform. And well, and I guess to an extent, content creators also are becoming a commercial platform. So obviously seen as more organic, but it is also commercial. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no,
what happens.
definitely. And exactly right. And just to leave, just to end the conversation, I actually watched a video, right? And just touching on ads and algorithms. So what this guy was basically saying was that let's just say you have $1 million to run on a campaign, right? So you're going to add it as ad spend, right? So instead of you giving that $1 million to Instagram or TikTok or whatever channel platform you're using, you give that to someone like Kim Kardashian who has access to 300 million followers, right? So you give her, and that content is going out to 300 million followers who has a relationship with her. So now the challenge with these platforms is that they're trying to not allow creators to have so much of that pull, because instead of you spending that cash on advertising, you're now
Putting it
approaching
on
a
them and
content
it's not
creator.
going to them. Yeah.
Exactly. So now that's why they'll try and limit your reach so that you actually go and spend your cash on content or
Yes.
advertising on the platform. So yeah, it's crazy how and you can never beat the
Okay,
algorithms,
so
right? I
my
mean,
assumption was correct.
yeah, yeah, no,
Basically,
exactly.
yes. Mm.
So yeah, so Julian, I think that brings us to the end of it, right? But and you and I have been chatting. I think we'll have a follow up. I think something you mentioned earlier on was finding your purpose. That's something that's so true to us as life space, to our creator journey. It's something that we've been developing courses and content on, and I think we'll probably schedule a follow up where we speak to our community about finding your purpose. And I think so many people just want to go on to, hey, where do I make money? And that's what I want to get into. But we both know that it's not sustainable, especially when you have those moments of throwing in the towel. You need something that's more consistent. And I think that's where finding your purpose, finding your why is so important, so that when you reach those moments, you have that long-term goal of, hey, it's not just about the money, but it's about this life that I want to live and living in your purpose. So yeah, I think, I'm really keen to have a follow-up, but, thank you so
Yes,
much.
certainly.
Yes. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And I think, our community is going to get, to know a bit about, who you guys are. And I'm sure that, we'll be chatting soon.
Okay, fantastic. And just it would be great also for people obviously to check us out
Yeah.
on the socials. On Instagram, we Butan_official. Then our website butan.co.za, just to get further background on the brand, and hopefully they love it and support us. And
Yeah.
yeah, Sylvia, thank you so much also for considering our brand, myself, and very happy to continue the conversation.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Julian.
Okay,
We'll chat
cool.
soon.
Thanks,
All
Warren.
right.